Mir Croft, 1,000 Pine Points to you. Grimlock, 500 Pine Points to you. And Paul Schaefer from David Letterman, 250 Pine Points to you. Yeah, Paul Schaefer and I go way back. He's Canadian, I'm Canadian. And we used to be in a band together. Good to see you here, Paul. Say hi to Dave Letterman for me. This is an example of a Christian who I don't like. Not the one on the left. Not this. I kind of like Sean. Sorry, Stephanie, I do not like you. And here's why. I think you say a lot of dangerous things that hurt people. Even more so than the who should I compare you to? No, I won't compare you to anyone. But here's why. This is a topic that is not just academic for anyone. This is a topic that is real life, humans trying to survive on this blue ball called Earth. And sometimes our attempts to survive fail, and sometimes to die is better than to live. And this is really real for me in my life with my family. And it's real to countless millions of people on this planet, dare I say, on a daily basis. How many people die on the planet per day? That's a good question. What's your intuition? What's your guess? It would be millions, right? It has to be. There's 7 billion people, 7.5 billion people on this planet. So I watched this yesterday, and I asked the question that Sean asked, and there was a lot of people interacting with me in the live stream chat yesterday. And so I'll try to go through this as calmly as possible. Should I give you the headline answer? Yeah, here's the headline answer. I mean, the headline question, headline point. I don't think most of you flag-waving phony Christians believe heaven's real. You just say you do. I don't think you do. And I think even a greater percentage, you don't really believe hell's real as a bad place that people go for ever and ever. I don't think you really believe that. Because if you did, you would behave differently. And you don't behave differently than people who are not Christians. You don't behave that much differently than atheists as far as clinging to life. Although, well, we'll get into that. I'm an atheist who, if my time is up, like, what's the guy? Frank Sinatra, I'm going to do it my way. I'm the god of my own life. Ooh, the Christians are running out. Click off. I also gotta try extra hard to keep this topic light and still make Christians smile, even though they think I'm going to hell.
So I thought, well, with my skill set on being able to teach people apologetics on how to defend the preborn child, perhaps I could take that skill set and apply it at the end.
Yeah, she's big on debating abortion. And my big push against her is, okay, you really think abortion's killing the babies? Put those women in jail for life. See, I don't think she would want to do that. I don't think she would vote for a politician who actually sought out every woman who's ever committed abortion in their life and put them in jail for life. You're not going to do that, Stephanie? You're not consistent in your beliefs?
Other end of life, to teach people how to be winsome and persuasive when it comes to speaking against assisted suicide.
You start the book with a really powerful story of suffering in your own life to kind of, I think, let the audience know this isn't just academic for you, but it's personal. Would you mind sharing that story and just focus on the question that you're aiming to answer?
Okay, yeah, this is a good point that Sean's bringing up. This is not just academic. This is like real life experiences and so forth. For me, it's my sister being totally paralyzed from MS, dying a slow and painful death, being in wincing pain. She would literally wince in pain on a daily basis. And after being on so much medication, all different types of drugs, her wanting to die at some point after many years, my mom, my dad, I think everyone wanted her, they would phrase it as, please God, let my sister die, let my daughter die, and all this sort of thing. Now let's see now compare that to Stephanie's story of pain and suffering.
In the book.
Sure, yeah. Well, when I thought about even how to enter into the topic, I really felt that at the heart of the issue on assisted suicide is the question of suffering. And if we have a wrong perspective on suffering, a disordered view of suffering, we're going to come to the wrong conclusion in response to suffering, namely embracing assisted suicide. So we really need to know, in light of suffering that all of us will experience in our lives, albeit in different ways, how ought we respond? And so I decided to go personal and share my own experience of probably one of the greatest sufferings I experienced in the last few years. 5 years ago, I was engaged. Now I'm happily married, but to a different person. So that first engagement never made it to the altar. And before things went south, it was just wonderful. It was the biggest dream of my life. I was 35 years old. I'd been journaling to Jesus for more than a decade about how I wanted a husband. And so it just felt like my life was falling into place. All my dreams were coming true.
Disney princess. Someday my prince will come. All my dreams were coming true. Found the perfect Christian man, so I thought. Journaling to Jesus for this perfect man.
And in the spring of 2015, our engagement ended. And I was devastated. Like, I have never experienced suffering, emotional suffering, the way I did, to the depths that I did.
I'm sorry. Call me any bad thing you want, but you're 35 years old and this is something I went through as a teenager. Lost love. I mean, you weren't even married. It's like, yes, you're engaged, but how many years were you dating? Like, seriously? You're comparing a broken relationship and broken engagement to people dying of terminal cancer, people in war-torn countries experiencing like limbs being chopped off and bombs going off and half their, like, you really, if the worst possible suffering you could imagine is a 10, sorry, Stephanie, this is a 1. I got to try so hard not to
that experience. And different people have different experiences of suffering, but for me, it was utterly profound, to the point that in that moment, I remember calling my sister and my cousin, and I felt so despairing, so overwhelmed. I felt like my whole future was bleak and dark, that I just said to them on the phone, to my sister,
your whole future, you're 35 years old, I'm going to die alone, spinster with 5 cats. Is that what you were thinking? By the way, that life's not that bad.
and cousin, I don't want to live, I want to die. And of course my cousin's like, where are you? And so I was
like, what? I just feel like being so judgmental right now. Should I? Man, I told my daughter just yesterday or the day before, don't get married unless you're ready don't get married until you're ready to be single for the rest of your life. Maybe Stephanie needed a father like that. In other words, know who you are before you share your life with someone else intimately for the rest of your life. Seems like Stephanie didn't have that. The reason why she was so depressed about breaking up with her engagement is because that was part of her identity, was in this man. And once that man went away, part of her identity went away. Sound familiar, Christians? It's just like with Jesus, right?
in my car, and she's like, don't drive, stay where you are. And you know, she drove to me, yes, and picked me up. And then my sister also drove to where I was and met us. And but so began a journey of healing, of living through suffering, of questioning God's goodness. God is.
There is. Let's look at the silver lining in this story. The silver lining is that we can rank suffering. And we can rank hers very, 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 very low compared to some.
Good. And I know in the moments where I questioned his goodness that I was wrong, not God was wrong. But it really took me on a whole journey to really wrestle with the question of suffering and how we ought to respond. And so then when I started to think about the topic of assisted suicide, I thought, really, what it's all about is suffering that is so profound that it causes some people to say, I no longer want to live. But because suffering is part of the human experience, and all of us have suffered in varying degrees, different ways, and all of us will suffer, then rather than give up on life, we need to help.
A lot of people in the live stream comments here are saying, well, here's a woman talking, she should be silent because Paul said that and everything. No, let's not go there with this. Like, she's not in church, and I don't even know if she's that type of Christian, but even if she were, she's not in church, she's not that rule, even in the conservative Christianity, only applies in the home and in the church. And technically, you could even say maybe not even in the home. The man is the head of the wife, not the home. There's a slight difference there. But of course, men and women live in a home together with kids.
People find meaning and purpose even in the difficult, even in the challenge. And that's what my own experience taught me, and so many things I learned.
Yeah, and I agree with this. But there comes a point where I think even very conservative-leaning Christians will have to, I think, agree that we have some pretty extreme cases where it is preferable to die rather than live. Like, what makes death so bad in the first place? Let's really think about this. Like, if I were to die, why is that bad? Well, from the perspective of my wife, she would miss me. She would miss what I provide for her. Same with my kids. Same with my dad, my mom, my sisters, my cousins. And of course, most of all my YouTube subscribers would miss me. But now let's assume this case where all my YouTube subscribers are okay with my death. They kind of almost want it to happen. And what if my wife and my kids and my family and everybody, they say, you know what, go ahead and die. We're fine with it. We're not going to, we might miss you a little bit, but we got your YouTube videos to always fall back on. And combine that with the fact that I'm in excruciating pain with an extremely low probability of recovery. It would take a miracle. Why is dying wrong? Why is, causing your death wrong?
And I often say I'm a better woman and a better wife today to my now husband because of the 5 years of suffering and insight and life experience that I then went through because of hardship.
I once had a really bad hangnail. And I tell you, that suffering for 5 days really built my character.
Those of you just joining us, we are here with Stephanie Gray Connors, who's written a new book called Start With What on Assisted Suicide. She's a pro-life speaker and talked about pro-life at the beginning of life.
I'm going to fast forward a bit.
A forward-looking question and shows us that no matter how difficult our circumstances, great good can come from terrible suffering and even terrible evil.
So those of you just joining us, we're going to look at some of the toughest objection. I have one coming up for you in a minute here, Stephanie, about assisted suicide. But we're going to take some questions from you as we start working through this interview. So if you want to put them in the comment room.
No, I'm not cranky at all. I'm just passionate. It's like I'm like an artist. I'm like a thespian. I'm just, even though I have 3 hard science degrees and I have the highest finance certification you can get in the world, I just tell you, the emotions just flow right out of me. Plus, I'm on day 6 of my keto only diet. My meat only diet. By the way, it's going great. Let's see. I think I've lost 6 pounds in 6 days, 7 days, is it? It was the 8th. I wrote it down. It's here somewhere on the table. 8th, 9th, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, at 1 o'clock today will be day 7. Day 7 completed. And my plumbing's good. I'm using less toilet paper, saving piles of money on toilet paper. Oh, it's great. Great to be alive.
Comment board, we'll come back to a number of those. So one of the points you make in the book I thought was fascinating is that society generally decries suicide, but makes exceptions when we put assisted in front of it. Why? What's going on?
Well, this is a stupid question, in my opinion. There's suicide and there's assisted suicide. Suicide is when a Joe Blow tries to end his own life and could fail, could make a mistake, could screw up and make his life even worse. Assisted suicide is assuming you have a doctor or some type of medical expert who can put you in a coma and kill you in your sleep, for example. Assisted suicide is typically in extreme cases where there's at least some type of oversight, where there's some type of time frame to think about things. It usually involves more than one person, families involved, or spouses. Suicide, typically not. There's a huge difference. So we don't even have to, let's just fast forward this one.
She's a motivational speaker. She's told her story. She is an artist. She does incredible art. And then there's videos of her. So she uses her mouth for her half limbs. And then there's videos of her putting her makeup on with like a makeup brush being held like this. And I'm watching her thinking, wow,
who's she
what
talking
she can
about?
do, I could never do. But my point is, several years after the hardship, when she started being really open about her story and having a more positive outlook on life, a local TV station featured an interview with her that they aired on TV. And now,
see, to me, this is not even okay. She's describing someone who has no arms. There's a huge difference between someone having no arms and someone being completely paralyzed and can't move except for their eyeballs and their mouth. That was my sister. There's a complete difference of someone having no limbs and being relatively pain-free versus someone who's completely paralyzed and is in extreme pain. Like, again, the suffering of an amputee is like maybe a 1.5 to 2 on that scale of suffering from 0 to 10. The point is, I think we can all agree there's some clear-cut cases where assisted suicide is good. And it's I'm going to make a huge claim here. It's maybe even evil not to do it. Yes, Christians, if you're against assisted suicide, you're evil. In some cases, not all cases. You're evil. You're a bad, bad person. See what I'm doing here? I'm appealing to the sense of, I don't want to be viewed as bad.
that story was aired at the exact moment there was a young man who was really despairing in his life because of difficulty he'd gone through. And he was planning on killing himself. He was so close. He had obtained a gun. He was going to end his life, but he had the TV on. And the TV that the station he tuned into was interviewing Zuli. And so he was captivated by this young woman.
Assisted suicide is illegal. Not in Canada, where I'm from and where Stephanie is from. And I think in some states in the United States, JD, am I right about that? Assisted suicide is legal in some states within the United States.
And her story, her suffering, her overcoming of all that she faced. And suddenly he felt that he could carry on. And so instead of picking up the gun and shooting himself, he picked up a pen and paper and he wrote her a letter, and they have since become friends. Now, I often use that story in response to the question you raised in order to demonstrate that no man is an island. Had Zuli killed herself back when she was a teenager and suicidal, then her story years later of overcoming hardship never would have been aired on TV.
I mean, this is ridiculous. These are not the cases most people are really looking at when it comes to assisted suicide. Like, if someone has terminal cancer, but they have done the research and say, well, look, there's this new drug coming out next week, and it has like a 30% chance of being effective, so why not try it? Like that, we're not talking about situations where you could possibly overcome the suffering and then look all the great things you can do in your life afterwards. We're talking about cases where it's like, I don't want to be gross here, but I can give real life cases of car accidents where people have been sawn in half and they're still alive and they're just sitting there bleeding out. And sometimes it takes minutes. Now, wouldn't you want them, like, unless we have the technology to bring two halves back together and connect all the veins? And I mean, seriously, you're going to let someone suffer for like 5 to 10 minutes if you could just... I'm sorry, that was a gross example, but it's true, it happens.
A pivotal moment when someone else was despairing, who then would have ended his life had he never heard of it.
Thank you, David. B, legal, so assisted suicide is legal in California, Colorado, DC, Hawaii, Maine, Montana, New Jersey, Oregon, Vermont, Washington, and Washington. Yeah, so if I ever get in a situation like my sister was in, I'm going to go to those states, throw a huge party, and say, adios, amigos. See, this is the thing. I think to get back to the title of this video, when my dad got really, really sick, he had a couple of heart attacks, and then he got cancer in the intestines, but it didn't spread. He and his friend, at the same time, got the same type of cancer almost nearly at the same time, and they were in the same hospital. His friend actually died. They were both Christians. His friend died. He lived. And I went home, and my dad was telling, how grateful he was that God saved his life, answered a prayer. And that not so many people were lucky like his friend. His friend died. And I said to my dad, why do you think that's a good thing? Maybe God's punishing you. Can you believe I said that to my own dad? I don't know if I used the word punish. But to say that you prayed for God and prayed to God and he answered your prayer to survive, and the other guy died. You believe, Dad, that your friend's in heaven right now, and now you're stuck on earth, still suffering of other things. It's like, maybe my dad wanted to be punished. I don't know. But if you really believe heaven is real, and is like, if earth is a 1 out of 10, heaven's a 10 out of 10. It's like, it's a no-brainer. And if you give me those verses that Paul said, I got work to do, and it's better to live for Christ than die. It's like, God can use me. Like, how selfish is that? That God can't accomplish his means without you? Christians, God doesn't need any one of you. No, he doesn't. To accomplish his means, I know you believe this. This is why I'm saying it. God does not need you. You're not special in that aspect of fulfilling God's plan. You don't have to be here. If you're not here, God can do it another way. I think, right? Isn't he all powerful? So don't give me this, well, I want to live just so I can, because God can use me in my relationships and so forth. No, God doesn't need you one bit.
Her story. So he was impacted by her presence and decided to keep living. But had she been absent from the world because of suicide or assisted suicide, then he also would have been impacted by her absence and very likely followed through on his inclination for suicide. So the reality is, when someone...
Yeah, the ripple effect. We get it. Okay.
...it, but because their neighbor requested it a year...
I'm trying to fast forward to the point where Sean asked my question.
...ago and had it, and they think, my neighbor isn't a burden on her family, and I feel like I'm a burden on my family, and I guess it's legal now, and since she asked for it, maybe I can ask for it too. Maybe if she's not a strain on others, then I won't be a strain on others. And so someone might even claim it's what they want, but they were impacted by the choice of another, by the influence of another, by the example of another.
So what if the family comes together and says, hey, we agree this is best, you're suffering.
Here we go.
We're all in agreement here that it's the most compassionate thing to do is for you to end your life. Does that change the equation? Because it seems that
this is the first question I asked. I'm not sure if Sean just came up with it himself or just was using my question.
There, at least a family would change.
Good question. I would say that even when people seem united on a position, if the position is inherently wrong, then it's not ethical. It's like if you have,
So, okay, this is what she's saying. She's saying that, well, even if everybody's agreed, if it's inherently wrong, then we still shouldn't do it. Well, what makes it inherently wrong? This is the real key issue. For people like Stephanie Gray Connors and even I think Sean McDowell, what makes something right and what makes something wrong is what God says, decrees, wills, anything that flows from his nature. Now, this comes to the real question for Christians that they really have to ponder. And this is a touchy question because I know there's many Christian parents who've had their children die of suicide, who they believe are Christian. Who cares what God says? Who cares? Who cares if God says assisted suicide is wrong? What does it matter? You know what? And I'm even entering your paradigm. Articulate for me the answer to my question. Who cares what God says? Even if your God's real, exists, and even if Christianity is true, should you not, if the family says it's okay to die, the person wants to die, they're in extreme pain, their suffering is like a 9 or 10 out of 10 compared to your 1, Stephanie? Who cares if God says it's wrong? How would you answer that question, Christians? Now, you got to pick your jaw up first, or maybe you got to pick yourself off the floor. How dare anyone ask that type of question? Who cares what God thinks? No, but seriously, articulate your answer. And you know what you're going to end up saying? But you don't want to, but I think you're maybe even thinking it. Well, God can hurt you. But you're already suffering like 10 out of 10. How can God hurt you? Well, you should just do it because this is what God wants. Well, who cares what God wants? Well, but He's the Creator and He has a purpose for you, and but you just gotta trust. Well, who cares? Why should you care what God thinks and decrees and says is wrong? And then you're going to get to the real issue. Well, you're suffering now a little bit here on earth, but you'll suffer more after you die. You don't want to suffer more after you die. You think 10 out of 10 is bad, Doug? Just wait till you get to hell. That's 100 out of 10. There's the correct answer, by the way. You really got to believe that hell exists in order to say, well, that's why you should care what God says. Because other than that, see, a lot of Christians believe that their Christian children who have committed suicide are still in heaven. Do you really believe that? And if you do, then why can't you say that a Christian who has assisted suicide, why can't they go to heaven? So if they're in extreme pain here on earth, they still get to go to heaven after they die. Who cares if God says it's wrong? And I asked that question in this live stream, I think a couple of times to, maybe not to Sean, but to other people in the live stream. Well, do you believe that Christians who have assisted suicide still go to heaven? It's just like they want to avoid answering that question. But one guy admitted to me, yes, if you're a true Christian, you still go to heaven. Okay, and then what's the big deal? Let's make God sad for a day. I'm sure He'll be okay. Right? God will be just fine. You might grieve the Holy Spirit for a day or two, but He'll be fine.
A 2-year-old child that has Down syndrome, and all of the family around the child, the parents, the aunts and uncles think, yeah, life's going to be hard if you have Down syndrome, especially because
she's comparing the type of suffering that I laid out with my sister, for example, to Down syndrome. Down syndrome children are some of the most happiest children on the planet. In fact, I think they could be. It's the opposite of suffering for them. Now, it's suffering for the people around them because they got to take care of them and help them and all these things. But for that individual, no, Down syndrome people are probably the most happy, peaceful, joyous people on the planet. This is why I think Down syndrome is kind of actually, do I say this, is beneficial for society in a way, because we can see that even with these limitations that they're happy and it can bring joy to others. I say this because I had a Down syndrome cousin who brought a lot of joy to his other cousins and so forth. But I do agree, it's a tough life.
So many people with Down syndrome have been aborted. They won't even know other people like them. We all agree as a family we want to end this child's life. And I think we would have this consensus of, whoa, that wouldn't be appropriate, even if there's agreement, because another year. And that's, if we reference my home country again, that's what we're seeing in Canada, where assisted suicide was legalized the last few years under very limited circumstances. Yeah. And already there's an effort right now in the government to expand the law so that more access to assisted suicide can occur. So I think the idea that we just pick a line, if we're going to pick anywhere, then the general attitude is when lives are involved and when there's a risk that we could do harm as well as good. The general attitude always is, let's err on the side of caution.
Notice now she's talking about there's a risk we might do harm. I thought this was about just doing the right thing. Remember, just a few minutes ago? It is ultimately bad, ultimately evil to have assisted suicide. Now she's making the argument that, well, we don't want to expand assisted suicide because it might do harm. Okay, if the issue is harm, unnecessary suffering, then we're on the same page. Then we can start talking about this. But don't tell me that assisted suicide is wrong because God said so. Because who cares what God thinks? Even if God's real, let him be sad. Let God, he can handle it.
Well, then if we err on the side of caution, I think a proper standard would be we allow nature to take its course. People die. The person who is...
Let nature take its course. You don't believe that for 1 second when it comes to keeping people alive. I mean, let me put it this way. I have a niece that was born 1 pound, 16 ounces. When was she born? early 90s. I don't know. No, late 90s. 1 pound, 16 ounces. If we were to let nature take its course and not intervene as human beings, do you think my niece would be alive today? Of course not. So if we can intervene as humans and play God in determining who stays alive, coming out of the womb, why can't we play God when it comes to ending life? I see an imbalance in the force here.
Against assisted suicide is not against death. We recognize that tragically, because of sin entering the
They talk about animals and pets coming up soon, I think, Aaron.
world, death entered the world. Death is a part of life, although it wasn't God's original design.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm going to give Pine points to DN Revan 778. 1 pound, 16 ounces would be 2 pounds. This is how Canadians say 2 pounds. No, it wasn't 1 pound, 16 ounces. It was probably 1 pound, 13 ounces, and I said 16 ounces. But yeah, that made me chuckle. Yeah. Yeah, I was born 1 pound, 160 ounces. That was my weight.
So I realize that one day I'm going to die, but there's a difference between dying naturally and being killed purposefully. So I think the line should simply be, when death comes knocking, we might not be able to hold our body against the door forever. Eventually, that door is going to be pushed open. But we ourselves should not open the door and invite.
Oh, sorry, David B. I didn't see you. The same number of Pine points to you as well.
Death in and inflict the intentional ending of someone else's life on them or on ourselves.
That's a similar distinction I've heard made when it comes to if there's spontaneous abortions or miscarriages.
Is the volume
would
okay?
that justify abortion? And the distinction you're making is there's a natural death that's unfortunate, and the intentional taking of a human life changes everything. And it sounds like it's the same principle.
We intentionally keep people alive when they're born. Why can't we intentionally stop people's life when they're old? Why the hypocrisy here? If we don't want to play God and let just nature take its course, Stephanie's very careful. She tries to keep the word God out of things as much as possible, I think, because she realizes that she wants to have some oomph in the political realm. Not that she wants to be a politician, but that she wants to persuade people to vote certain ways. So she keeps the word God out of it. But she'll say, why don't we just let nature take its course? And when people are about to die, just let nature kill them. Well, let's do that for infants, shall we? Let's be consistent.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. One of the things we hear is that assisted suicide is death with dignity. Why do you take issue with that phrase and don't actually believe it's a reflection of dignity?
Good question. So I would ask the person who makes that claim, what do you mean by that? And what is a dignified death? And if someone, for example, has cancer and instead of choosing assisted suicide, they die naturally, but they're very emaciated and they, vomit a lot and they constantly need medical and other supports around them to aid them with all they're going through. Are you implying that such an individual doesn't have dignity?
Yes, not as much. Yes, I'll make that claim. When I'm vomiting and urinating in my own pants, your dignity goes down. To watch people waste away and become just skin and bones, to have their own children see their father or their mother a certain way as a strong, loving parent who has their back, and then just see them slowly waste away. Yes, your dignity has gone down. To have your own kids change your diapers. Yes, your dignity has gone down. Part of having dignity, I think, includes being able to wipe your own bum.
Or they have lost their dignity, or that when they die naturally, that is not dignified. And on what basis are you making that claim? Another point I would make in response is I can recall, and I reference this in my book, a story I read in the news. I believe it was France. It was
actually, you know what? I forgot to tweet Stephanie. If someone has Stephanie, can find Stephanie's Twitter, and even Sean McDowell, they're welcome to join me here.
some European country where a apartment was entered in the last few years that had been locked for decades. And some people believe that it had been unentered for about 70 years, so since the war. And then there was some evidence of later newspapers, but still decades we're talking about this apartment was untouched. And when the owner of the apartment eventually died, the people that were being bequeathed it, I guess, got access to the apartment. And inside, it was like stepping into a museum. I mean, besides the fact that there were cobwebs everywhere and dust on everything, this woman had been very wealthy. And there was this one piece of artwork by a famous artist that when the people went into the apartment, found it, they realized it was worth, I think it was over €1 million.
What is
and
this?
It was ultimately auctioned off. But the painting, upon discovery, didn't look very good because it was covered in dust and it was covered in cobwebs. And so I often use that in order to ask people the question, did the painting lose its worth? Did it lose its value? A, because no one knew about it, and B, because it was covered in dust.
Yeah, this is that whole thing. I know where this is going now. At first I was confused where she was going with this, but the whole idea of value and dignity. And this is one of my favorite questions. I don't think Christians really believe that all humans have value, or at least the same value. Oh, that they definitely don't believe that. Now, you say you believe that. Some Christians say that because all humans are created in the image of God, we all have that inherent value. But I don't really think you believe it. And here's why. I can give very simple hypothetical questions where you're forced in a choice between saving a service dog and saving a pedophile. Who do you save? What do you save? There are many animals on this planet who have more inherent value than a human being, in my opinion. Now, in God's opinion, or in Stephanie's opinion about God, you're going to disagree. But yet, if I propose these hypotheticals, you're going to end up agreeing with me. If you had to exterminate a serial killer or a fire dog who helps pull people out of fires, you've got to exterminate one. I mean, a serial killer who hasn't been caught. This is a hypothetical. He's going to kill more people if you don't exterminate him. Now, and if you use the term value as just this thing saying, well, value by definition because God created, but really doesn't have any true meaning on how people live their lives, then okay, fine. But yeah, who cares if humans have value and meaning in the eyes of God? Even God himself does not value human beings equally. What do you mean, Doug? Well, just look at the Bible, look at the Old Testament, look at even the New Testament. If you're a Calvinist, some people have been created as vessels of destruction. Sheep, goats. Some humans are sheep, some humans are goats. And the goats, some are wheat and some are chaff. Some humans deserve to be slaughtered in war in the Old Testament under God's command. Some are commanded to be spared and saved. In the Old Testament, there are humans who are blessed. In the Old Testament, there's humans that are cursed. So in the practical, everyday application of this term called value and dignity, oh no, Yahweh does not view everybody equal in terms of value and dignity. He'd rather some people be dead. The God you worship and serve, Stephanie, wants people dead sometimes. Well, that's justice, Doug. Okay. Maybe assisted suicide is a form of justice. From God. Ooh, there's a little wrench.
No, because it's sold in an auction for over €1 million. Instead, comfort and surround the individual with beauty. And when we respond that way, we're showing, oh, you have dignity because of who you are, not because of what you can do or no longer do, not because of what you did look like or no longer look like. Your dignity is inherent to your being, and I will respond by reverencing you,
Thanks,
which
Amatrol.
reinforces you have dignity, as opposed to just ending your life, which implies dignity is something you can lose.
In some ways, at the heart of this debate is the question of
Yeah. See, yeah, I would, Stephanie's implying you can't lose dignity as a human being. And I'm saying I would disagree with that. But again, it depends on the nuance on how you define it.
dignity. Is it something you have because of what you do or something inherent? And Mark Regnerus, a sociologist in Texas.
Yeah, and I would lean towards that value and dignity are more about what you do or what you have done or what you could do rather than something inherent in you. The reason why we value babies is because they grow up. I mean, sure, babies are cute, but let's face it, they are stinking, pooping, barfing machines. And the reason we put up with it is because they grow up into cute little toddlers, and then they become nasty little teenagers, and then they become rebellious early 20s, and then they start to be productive members of society.
He wrote an article maybe 3 or 4 years ago, if I remember, called Dignity 2.0. And he said dignity, according to our founders, the Universal Human Rights Declaration, classical Western philosophy, is something inherent you have. Like if you're the number 2, you're inherently an integer. You're inherently even. Humans have dignity because of what they are. But it's shifted now that we gain or lose dignity based upon our choices or based upon how people treat us. So it's something that can be gained or lost. So
yes, and even Yahweh does that.
Seems like at the heart of what you're saying is that human beings have inherent dignity.
Oh, I got to show this. I asked someone in this live stream chat, basically the title of this video. It amazes me how many Christians cling to life when heaven awaits. Why? If you're going to die soon and you're screaming out in pain, why not assisted suicide? What's the worst that could happen? He didn't quite answer my question, but this was his answer. And this, I think, represents most Christians. His name is Church Lord PineCreek, because the Bible says not to. Ding, ding, ding. There you go. That's what it's all about, right? And the Bible's God's word, and God doesn't want you to commit assisted suicide, so it doesn't matter how much pain you're leaving, how much suffering you're ending. If God says so, then that's why you shouldn't do it.
So like a painting that was lost and dusted has to be cleared off, didn't lose its internal value. So because it has value, we should treat it accordingly. And that's the same with human beings. They might lose ability, they might suffer, but there's dignity that is there. Thus, we should treat them accordingly.
And this dignity is, I think, in Sean's view, would that dignity, this is an interesting question for Sean. Would that dignity still exist if it were true your God does not exist, or any God exists? Would you then say, no, this whole concept of dignity would just go away? This whole concept of value would just go away? Inherent value? I think he would say that. I think the only reason guys like Sean McDowell and Stephanie Gray Connors believe that humans have dignity and value is because God said so, because God created humans this way. And if that's your answer, if I'm right, what's the second best reason why humans have dignity and value besides God? And that's probably my reason.
That seems to change everything. If you view human beings as having inherent dignity, that's kind of at the heart of this, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because if I think of, different campaigns to, amongst teenagers, help them with their self-esteem, help young girls, see their value, it's all oriented to a message that aligns with what you just said, where we tell young girls, your value isn't in how popular you are. It isn't in your looks. It isn't in how much makeup is caked on your face.
Your value's not in your looks? Man, we have evolved to prefer unblemished, unlike Yahweh. Well, actually, we're in the same way as Yahweh, because I read yesterday Yahweh doesn't like blemishes on people either. But there is cultural-wide types of beauty that humans value. Now, I'm not talking about supermodel type things, but I can't use like animal terms because Christians don't view humans as animals. But I want to say that the reason why men and women breed is a lot based on looks, especially for men, and beauty. It's actually, you can see that through evolution, that if you see someone who looks sickly, like I think most humans, no matter what culture you're in, can identify when someone looks sickly. You're not going to want to have coitus with that person because you might get sickly. It's a way for survival. Now, why am I talking about this?
Your value is in who you are. But we seem to lose that message when it...
Oh, yeah. That beauty is a part of value. And I realize this makes some people feel really bad inside because I'm not beautiful. Well, to some people you are, of course. And beauty is, is more than just looks, of course. But yeah, you can say the goal, I think, for parents raising kids is to say, look, you're a 5 out of 10, but that's okay. You'll be fine. In fact, you can be a very successful person in society and do many great things being a 5 out of 10 in looks. I'm a 5 out of 10 in looks. How do I know I'm a 5 out of 10 in looks? Because when I go to the store, people don't stare at me. You know you're either extremely attractive or extremely ugly if people stare at you. If people don't stare at you, you're fine. Relax in that.
It comes to the end of life. So what we're trying to proclaim to teenagers about an inherent dignity is something that we're claiming can be lost, that it isn't really in you when it comes to someone who is sick and suffering. And so that's why I think it is so important that we be proclaimers.
Yeah, everybody rate your looks in the live stream chat now. I just said I'm a 5. Actually, I may be being hard on myself. I might be a 6. Right? I'm going to give Sean a 7. I'm going to give Stephanie a 7. So I think Stephanie and Sean have more inherent value than I do. Everybody rate yourself in looks.
Of a message of an inherent dignity. And that means proclaiming the gospel. And that's one of the things I wrestled with, and I talk about in my preface. Do I write a book that is totally non-sectarian, where I just make, arguments against assisted suicide almost from a human rights perspective, human equality perspective, or do I incorporate the gospel message? And I think you can go so far with a non-religious message, but I really believe the fullness of the message against assisted suicide really involves a gospel-centered message, because
yeah, there it is. The real issue here is the gospel-centered message. It's basically doing what God says. Okay, let's fast forward here.
The principle that's generally been used over the years, decades, centuries, is one where ethicists will talk about that which is proportionate versus disproportionate. Maybe more classically, it's been referred to as that which is ordinary and that which is extraordinary. And so I would say that we have a duty or responsibility to pursue that which is ordinary or proportionate, which means it's not excessively burdensome and there's a hope of benefit. But we don't have a moral duty to pursue that which is extraordinary.
By the way, this is a bit of an aside, but I really need a new wardrobe to help my beauty. Like, right, I said I was between a 5 and 6. Maybe I'm a 6 on beauty. But what helps is to dress well. So, if you want to be a 7 and you're a 6, you got to dress well. So I need a new wardrobe. So I need some subscribers or some viewers listening right now who's really fashionable to help me out. My wife doesn't have time. She's too busy. And she prefers not to because, whatever. So if there's any gay men that can help me out, let me know via email. Send me some Amazon links. Or really fashionable women. I prefer gay men who are fashionable because they know where it's at. They wear clothes like I would wear. Or would. Wait a minute. Next week, if I do a live stream, am I going to dress like a gay? But there's nothing wrong with dressing like a gay man. Is there a gay look? No. I just want to look good. So if there's any gay men who can help me out with my wardrobe, let me know.
Ordinary or disproportionate, which would be excessively burdensome with no hope of benefit. So that's the general theory. Now let's look at it in a case where you've got someone.
Yeah, no, it has to be gay. I'm prejudiced. I'm bigoted when it comes to I want only gay people to help me out. Because I play the probabilities, and the probabilities that a straight man can't help me. Almost a straight white man. I want a gay black guy to dress me.
Who's non-responsive. If what we're doing is providing nutrition and hydration, which their body is capable of processing, it can break down the nutrients and so forth. It's not harming them by giving them hydration. It's not causing fluid to fill in their lungs and make them feel like they're drowning. But instead, it's actually preventing them from feel like they're dehydrated. I mean, that must be difficult for her body to take. And so she basically died by starvation and by dehydration, and it was a very brutal and painful death. So she wasn't communicative in a way you and I are, although the parents and brother would say that there had been indicators that she was comprehending things. But as time went on, one exception for assisted suicide, why not two? Whatever basis or rationale we.
Oh yeah, okay, I remember this part. So this is basically the slippery slope argument. Like if you listen to a guy like Doug, if you listen to PineCreek, he's making the case that there's that maybe assisted suicide could be wrong in the majority of cases. But aren't there clear-cut cases where we can all agree that it's better that this person die than live? And she's saying no, because then it becomes a slippery slope. And then where do we draw the line? Well, this is part about being human, and this is part about deciding how to have a society. You got to make these tough decisions and draw the line somewhere.
Provide for this one particular exception is probably a type of rationale that would also apply to other exceptions. And so there's really one of three positions. You can have suicide assistance for no one, you can have suicide assistance for some, and you can have suicide assistance for all. Well, most people are horrified at the third option. But then they kind of go to this middle zone where they...
Why couldn't you have assisted suicide for all given certain parameters? Like you have to have 3 doctors say, yes, you do have terminal cancer. And yes, you are suffering based on the amount of painkillers we're giving you, and we've maxed out, and you're still suffering. Yes, your family wishes you dead. They're hoping you're dead soon. You hope you're dead soon. Everybody's like, why can't you say assisted suicide for all, given certain metrics? You could even have a cooling off period or whatever. But if someone's in, like my sister's situation, what's probably best for Christians like Stephanie, instead of worrying about whether assisted suicide is wrong or not, for people who I'm saying are clear-cut cases for assisted suicide, why not just go to their bed where they're dying and pray in the name of Jesus for them to be completely healed instantaneously, not through death, but through life? Stephanie, do you really believe that your God interacts with the world today? Do you really believe that your God can do miracles? Maybe if God started helping people more in the name of Jesus with powerful miracles like he did in the early church, supposedly in Acts, this assisted suicide issue wouldn't be that bad.
Say, okay, well, it would be wrong to give suicide assistance to everyone, but if someone wants to jump off a bridge, I think I should try to stop them. So, but what if someone's close to death and they're really uncomfortable and they just don't see any point in continuing?
Yeah, David Martin says that's what Oregon has, assisted suicide for all with parameters. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next.
Qualitative difference between the two. And any criteria we give to say you shouldn't commit suicide is going to bring some kind of contradiction and inconsistency when we talk about assisted suicide. So I guess I'm bringing together in my mind, we tend to think about these as like different issues, and you're saying actually they're exactly the same issues. The particulars change, but the principles are the same for both of them. Is that fair?
It's totally fair. And that's why I love being on your show, because you summarize things so well. So yes, I couldn't have said it better.
Okay, well, good. I'm trying to get my own mind. Here's a great question that jumped up, and I'd be curious.
Oh, is this mine?
Curious how you would address this one. Joe Jersey says, How is a dying soldier on the battlefield asking for that last dose of morphine? Wouldn't that be an exception?
Yeah. Methinks that Stephanie Gray Connors has not watched Saving Private Ryan. I mean, I think in history there's many examples where there has been assisted suicide on the battlefield. Giving too much morphine will kill you, but will kill you in a lower painful way. Okay, so I'm curious to see what Stephanie will say to this.
So great question, Joe. And what I would say is it is or isn't, depending on why the morphine is being administered. If he is in so much pain that the morphine as a painkiller is going to stop his pain, then it would actually be...
Yeah, okay. She's saying what makes it... This is interesting. What makes it wrong is the motivation. Was the morphine injected to help with pain, or was it injected to end his life? If it's to end his life, wrong. If it's to reduce pain, right. That's what I'm hearing her say.
Ethical to kill a person's pain by administering a painkiller. It's the very nature of what painkillers are for. But if his pain level, let's say, has been addressed, but he's just like, I'm dying, when the pain comes back, instead of another dose, like just up the dose, give me more than I need in order to tip me over to end my life.
I don't think she's aware. Stephanie, are you aware that some people can be basically maxed out on morphine and still experience pain?
Then at that point, the administration of the morphine isn't to kill his pain. It is to kill his body.
So yeah, she's just saying here, what makes assisted suicide wrong is because you're killing a person.
And so that's what we want to discern anytime someone is sick in the hospital, whether they're on a battlefield or whether they're in a hospital or getting home care, is we want to ask, why am I administering this medication, this treatment, whatever I'm doing?
Yeah. Okay. So let's say Christianity is true, God is real, and someone is administering morphine to a patient thinking that this is just to reduce pain, and the patient ends up dying. In God's eyes, did they do something wrong or right? Because basically, they killed another individual. Is it manslaughter at least? Maybe not premeditated murder. But in God's eyes, just adding too much pain medication and it ends up killing someone. Isn't that still killing? So if you want to live with yourself, if you're a nurse listening or a doctor listening and you're a Christian and you want to live with yourself, just tell yourself you're administering this pain medication to lower their pain. Even though in the back of your head, you're saying, oops, this might be over the limit. I might kill this patient, and this patient's terminally ill and wants to die now, and all their family wants to die. And they're basically looking at me and saying, with their words, but with their eyes, they're telling me, help us end this. By the way, this happens. If you don't think this happens, you're wrong. There's a lot of wink, wink, nudge, nudge from family to the eyes of the doctor without actually saying the words, help us end her suffering, his suffering. And Stephanie's making it sound like what makes it right or wrong is motivations.
Why am I doing it? And if it is in response to some type of pathology, some type of illness in the body, and it is designed to aid that person in their suffering, then it's ethical to do. But if we're administering such a high dose with the intention of eliminating the person, then that is where we will have crossed the line.
In God's eyes, right? Or in your eyes. But so what if we cross that line? If it's obvious this person's going to die, and it's obvious he's in extreme pain on the battlefield, who cares if you are administering it to kill them? Who cares if God's upset with that? Stop trying to please Daddy for a second and care about your fellow humans.
So it's back to the intentions, really. And I think you talk about this in your book, that if there's some medication, morphine, whatever, that helps eliminate the suffering, but the side effect is that it could speed up death, in some circumstances that would be justified because of the intention of the act that's being done.
Correct. That you're not only intending to kill the pain and not the person, but the various pain. And I'm actually wanting to end the person's life. Well, then clearly on one or both of those levels, I'm doing something wrong. That's why even in hospitals, I've not been in this situation, but some loved ones have. After different surgeries they've had, they themselves are the administrators of the painkiller. And so they're laying in bed, and if the pain is really bad, there's a button that they get to press. And there eventually comes a point where the pressing of the button no longer gives you painkiller, because the doctors and nurses know there's a certain point where it would be harmful to take that much. So they want to give you a degree of control that when you really feel pain, you press it, but not give you so much control that you would actually make an unwise decision in your pain.
Why do you think it's unwise? Just because it's the taking of everyone's life? Like, this is all definitional. It's just like, it's wrong because God said so. I think that's basically what Stephanie's saying.
And then, knocking your
hack some of that. But I'm curious what your comments would be to someone who's not a believer, who had a sister die extreme pain, and it seems the family did want her to pass away soon. Soon. She was a Christian and suffered great.
Okay, here's my question.
And I'm gonna give this to you because I know you can handle it, but this is from someone named Doug. He's an atheist, is not a Christian. And he says, my sister died 8 months ago on a feeding tube. She had MS. Extreme pain every day. The family wished her to die soon. She was a Christian and suffered great.
By the way, it wasn't in the beginning. It wasn't that way, but I was in communication with my mom and dad and so forth. I think I'm quite fairly confident that the husband, I'm not confident about my niece and nephew, but I think they would say yes. I think the whole family were agreed that it would be better if she died. In fact, I remember my mom saying, yeah, we're praying for our daughter, your sister, to die. And I visited my sister 3-4 years ago, and I remember I was going to ask her point blank, do you want to die? We were alone at sort of like a party, a gathering. And the family was around, and I managed to get alone because at that time I know if my sister's husband heard, he would be really sad. But I was about to ask the question, then someone came and I couldn't ask the question. But I do know that family has told me that at one point, my mom told me at one point that my sister in the last stages said, yes, I'm willing to, I want to die. I'm ready to go. Enough is enough.
Greatly for years because of her Christianity. Now, I don't know what that means because of her Christianity. We don't have to unpack some of that. But I'm curious what your comments would be to someone who's not a believer, who had a sister die extreme pain, and it seems the family did want her to pass away soon.
And that's very hard. I mean, my first response is to just express my condolences, not only for the loss of your sister, but the profound suffering, not only for her, but for all of you, because it is not easy to see and witness and be with a loved one.
I appreciate her pointing that out because so many times the suffering of one individual, like I suffer when my kids just get a cold or the flu or get food poisoning. I don't like seeing my kids suffer, and no parent does. But we're talking about a situation where, like I said, we're 10 out of 10 on the scale. It's really hard to find human suffering worse than this, being completely paralyzed, completely helpless, and in pain, yet being cognizant of what's going on, having your faculties of what's going on, knowing that with MS especially, there is as close as to 100% no hope. Like with other medical issues, you can at least maybe say there's 2% hope or 3% hope or whatever. But with MS, when your nerves, the myelin sheath has eroded away and you've lost mobility and all these things, there's basically no hope unless, there is a God and intervenes with a miracle.
And when they're suffering, because we so badly want to alleviate their suffering. I remember after my dad had surgery, he had a very serious complication and the doctors didn't know initially what it was. He was rushed to another hospital and I was in the emergency room beside his bed. And I remember wanting to scream at all the nurses because they were handling other patients. And I wanted to be like, don't you see my dad is suffering? Like, what are you going to do right now to fix it? So I can relate to that just deep desire within to want to instantly correct a loved one's suffering. That desire is good.
Okay, where did that desire come from? From your perspective, Stephanie, that desire to alleviate suffering, wouldn't you say that's from God? Or would you say it's from my worldview, that we evolved this way? For the people that we love, we don't want them to see them suffer.
And the wish that that she would die soon was perhaps more an expression of a wish that her suffering would go away. Which is really what I think when we say,
yeah, we don't want her to suffer. We also don't want her to be paralyzed and have to be 100% dependent on people. We want her to be better, completely better.
I want to die, or I want my loved one to die. It's not that so much as that we want the suffering to stop. What I ask people to,
but when those two are if life is so tightly intertwined with this suffering, this extreme suffering, and you can't separate the two. If you're alive, it comes with this. Then you can't separate it. No, we don't want her to stop suffering. I mean, we don't want her to die. We just want her to stop suffering. You can't separate those two. Those two are joined at the hip. You can't have one without the other in this case. Some cases I agree you can, but not this one. This is why I brought it up.
To consider, as hard as it is to be suffering or to witness another person suffering, are there certain standards we have, certain lines where we say, I may not cross this line, no matter how difficult it gets? To give an analogy, and it's very different from the circumstance this man's sister found herself in, but I think, for example, if you have someone who has a great goal of finding a cure for cancer, but to do that, they have to become a scientist. To do that, they have to go to university. In order to get into university, they decide to bribe the university. Well, I think we could all agree that that goal.
Oh, good example, David 22585. He doesn't want a divorce. He just wants the marriage to stop. Yeah, perfect example.
While laudable, does not justify bribing the university. I mean, we have cases in the news right now where this happened in the last couple of years. And so in the same way, where that's like a golden standard, I may not cross the line of bribe.
Yeah, what's the golden standard? God said so. This is all just God said so. And Stephanie, I'm encouraging you to be a rebellious Christian. I'm encouraging you to make God sad. I'm encouraging you to even make God mad at you. And realize, I think a part of you realizes that it is better to purposely end the life for people, as an example, my sister. That is better. It is good. And I would even throw the word morally good in front of there. Now, if your line in the sand is because God said don't do it, which can be argued, and in fact, maybe I should make that argument. Well, I did already when I said that God uses people to end lives of other people all the time, especially in war. But there's other examples as well. I'm encouraging Christians to rebel against their God. Because what do you have to lose against rebelling against your God if you're a true Christian? Now, Stephanie believes that all Christians who choose to have assisted suicide go directly to hell. Okay, I can understand. Good reason, Stephanie, but are you willing to say that? Remember, I'm entering your worldview. Are you willing to say that all Christians who commit suicide or assisted suicide are going straight to hell, and maybe even the people who do help them with it? If not, then I would say, who cares if your God gets upset and is mad and sad with you? Do it anyhow. You still get to go to heaven. Are you worried that you will have like a smaller mansion as compared to a bigger mansion in heaven?
At the university, the kind of gold standard is I may not cross the line and commit suicide or commit homicide, but we need to do everything in our power to alleviate someone's suffering. I don't know the specifics of her case.
Yeah, well, I just told you the specifics. Every pain medication available was used on her. Percocet, morphine, even cannabis, you name it. Even she, I think, tried some herbs that, the Christians often peddle. No, this is 5 years of paralysis, feeding tube, extreme pain, but yet still cognizant, bed sores, just that he required surgery. Just, oh man. When you walked in her room, it stunk from rotting flesh, urine in the diaper. And I tell you, she, I think, knew it as well. And where's her dignity in that? Bringing back up dignity.
And can't speak to the specifics, but having friends who are palliative care physicians, I do know that, for example, palliative care physicians are specialists in pain control.
Yeah, all this doesn't apply to my sister. It's like, no. And it doesn't apply to so many other people on this planet right now. If there's Christians who disagree with me or agree with me, you can call in. But I think I've had enough of this. Yeah, and I'm looking at the live stream chat on Sean's video here. There are so many people said sorry for your loss, condolences, and so forth. And instead of saying sorry for your loss or condolences, I rather have Christians say, you know what? Maybe assisted suicide is a good thing. Maybe we should have assisted suicide. Even if it does mean Yahweh's upset with us and sad. In other words, in the Christian worldview, maybe Christians should say, maybe we should do the thing that's immoral. I know it sounds weird, but if you truly think assisted suicide is immoral, maybe you should consider being immoral once in a while for the good of humanity. Right, Matt B. Yeah, I think people like Stephanie try hard to leave God out of it. But when she uses words like, how did she phrase it? Some, standard, the ultimate line in the sand. She's hinting towards God's nature, what God says, without actually saying it. But she did say the word God a couple times as well. We need to fit the square block of Christianity into the round hole of reality, no matter what. Interesting quote. Keegan Kidder. Oh, you're a Christian, right, Keegan? I really want to talk to a Christian about this. I really want them to answer the question of, who cares what God thinks on this issue? Let's be specific and just stay on this issue. So what if God says it's bad and you do it anyhow? What's the worst that could happen? I really want a Christian to tell me why it's bad to disappoint God. I think you really only have one good answer, and that is because he can hurt you even more by not letting you into heaven. You see how I phrased that? I phrased it on purpose that way. He can hurt you even more by not allowing you into heaven. Yeah, I'm not sure if my sister was on fentanyl. I think she was, actually. Yeah, and another thing is, I made the mistake during the Iraq War of watching some really horrible stuff that you can get on some dark websites. And I tell you, for most of you Christians who shelter yourself from so many things, you have no clue the type of suffering there is on this planet. You can probably imagine, but I mean, you watch movies. Well, actually, some Christians don't even watch R-rated movies. So, I mean, thank you for the donation, Be a Wolf. Your friend is dying. You have full knowledge that if you administer medicine, he will die in 1 hour with no pain. Else he suffers for 2 hours before death. Is it still the motivation that matters? Thank you for the donation. Catherine is a Christian. She says, yeah, I fear God terribly, and I've been telling him lately he's my worst enemy. Whoa. Catherine, you don't have to live in fear like this. Even the Christians are agreeing with me one part. But you know what? Test that belief. Here's a good test for the belief. If you are scared of God, hold up your finger, ask God to remove it slowly and painfully in the name of Jesus. Oh, we get some Christians knocking now. Hang on. I'm coming. Thank you for the donation, Roger Wenzel. Thank you, Doug, for your work. You're very welcome. By the way, someone donated yesterday. I forget your name, but thank you. You know who you are, and I missed it.
Very welcome.
There you go. You're on. Hi, Irish with some sun. I recognize your name.
Well, Doug, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Well, it's finally good to actually be on your show. I want to call a few times, but I've been nervous.
Why would you be nervous?
I don't know, because sometimes I I have foot and mouth disease, you see. I always put my foot in my mouth.
Okay. Now, if memory serves, you are an agnostic Christian, is that right?
Yes, that's what I would describe myself as.
Hey, I remembered, see?
So reason being that I don't particularly think that you can prove certain things, such as the resurrection. For me, Christianity it resonates with me in terms of the idea of an incarnation, resurrection, the ultimate redemption of all things. I'm a universalist myself, but because I don't think you can prove it, I can only use existentia. I can be like,
That's
yeah,
fine. We
maybe,
don't have to talk about why you're an agnostic. I'm more interested in this assisted suicide thing. So, did you agree with the things I said? Disagree?
I agreed with the things you said. I think if I were in that situation and there really is no way of helping that person, I mean, if we medically can't do anything about it, why would we keep their suffering? What is the actual good that's gained from it? I don't see any.
And how would you answer the question? Like, let's say it's true that God really doesn't want people to have assisted suicide. Why is going against God bad?
Well, I would wonder, why would God want them to be in suffering? Why would God want that in the first place? Because it's always going to be some Christian telling me, oh, God wants it. And I'm like, why? Oh, because the Bible says so. Where? Like, I don't see the point of it, is what I'm saying. So I would just tell them, I don't see the reason why. And you're just saying you think God wants that to be the case. So why would I go by your interpretation versus their objective suffering?
Well, Stephanie, I think, would say it's pretty clear in the Ten Commandments, for example, thou shalt not kill.
God ordered people to kill.
Yeah, so thou shalt not kill unless God says so first. And
basically, yeah. A lot of these people, they think that there's an intrinsic wrong to these things, and really they just think, oh no, it's only wrong if God doesn't tell you to do it, which is kind of silly.
Okay. So if I was paralyzed and in pain and terminally ill, I can count on you to pull my plug?
If your family wanted it and you wanted it and there was no other choice, I'd be like, we got to pull the plug, let Doug go.
Okay.
As much as we'll miss the show, we got to let him go.
Yeah. I had a thought about my wife. Yeah, see, my wife once said that if she had a choice between living or killing a baby in her womb, she would rather her just die and keep the baby alive, even though she has kids already existing. Now, this is not exactly assisted suicide, but, well, in a way it is. And that just frightened me, that some Christians rather keep a baby alive that may or may not survive and give up all the responsibilities. But this doesn't really have to do with assisted suicide. Do you think Jesus' death on the cross was assisted suicide?
I don't know. And I think that some Christians would probably, even the ones who are against assisted suicide, would make the distinction between self-sacrifice and assisted suicide. Now, whether that distinction actually works, I don't know. But they would probably say there's a difference between giving up your life for another good, like helping someone, as opposed to just, I'm in pain, I want to end it. But then you get to the question of, well, can someone give up their life for another good, such as ending their pain? Why is that not another good, like giving up your life for someone else? So they have to argue the point of why it's different.
Yeah. Because I really do think you could view Jesus' sacrifice as a type of assisted suicide. Because he knew he was going to die and he walked right into it. He could have avoided that sacrifice, but he purposely wanted to die, and he purposely did things that led to his death, according to the story.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to argue with them why there's a difference between self-sacrifice and assisted suicide.
Yeah. Like my sister, was that self-sacrifice? If she would have said, yeah, kill me, because she doesn't want to put suffering on others around her. So for the well-being of her family, she gave her own life for us. Now, if Jesus can do it, and we're supposed to do what Jesus did, then why can't my sister do that?
That's actually a good question. I think when you ask them that, they might turn into utilitarians. They'll say the suffering that your sister will alleviate is not equal to the suffering that Jesus would alleviate by dying on the cross. They might say something like that. Or they would just have to come back to, well, it was okay because God said it. So
Yeah, but my
it'll
sister,
be,
just like Jesus, my sister, if she chose to die to help alleviate my suffering, my sister, I would say my sister died for me. Just like Jesus died for me. Yeah, I'm tempted to ask that question of a Christian who disagrees with me, but yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm going to leave it open for a few more minutes to see if there is such a Christian out there who disagrees with me who's willing to come on.
I'm sure there is. Whether it'll come on or not is the other question.
I don't understand why people are scared to come on with me.
I think it's because what you said was right, because whenever I was really big into apologetics, a lot of the time they won't admit this, but a lot of time they do it because they don't want to feel stupid. They want to be like, well, we have good reasons to believe what we do, even though the Bible says that it's foolishness to everyone else.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for hopping on.
No problem.
Take care. I know there's some Christians who want to hop on. They got butterflies right now. It's okay. Just come on, tell me why I'm wrong and leave. Or tell me why I'm right and leave, I guess. About some things. If I had the mustache, then people would come on. Can God choose to do things while also asking us not to? Sure. You're saying God's special, right? Category error. I get you, Keegan. But here's my question for Keegan. And Keegan, I know you're a Christian, right? I'm pretty confident. Why is disappointing God bad? Why is purposely going against what he says bad? So let's say Stephanie was correct. That there's a line in the sand that we don't cross. Why is crossing it bad? Second question I have for you, Keegan, is do you believe people who do assisted suicide who are Christian, do they go to hell? Now, I know that's a tough question to answer, but I'm asking your belief, not what you know that to happen. Do you lean hell or lean heaven? In other words, I am pleading with Christians to do the wrong thing in this case, from their worldview. I am pleading to Christians to disobey their God in this specific case. I'm talking about the specific case that I outlined, for example, with my sister. Not this 1 or 2 out of 10 suffering of, oh, I'm sad because my boyfriend left me or my fiance left me. It would be killing someone, that's a fact. Yes, but why is that wrong? Because we love God above all. Hey, thank you, Street, for putting yourself out there. Above ourselves and the doctrine of suicidal going straight to hell is wrong, not biblical. Okay. So what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing you say that it's not biblical that Christians who do assisted suicide or any suicide go straight to hell. That's not biblical. And you're saying that you should do what God says because you love God. Why should you do what God says just because you love them? I love my wife. My wife loves me. But if I told her to go jump off the cliff, she's not going to do it. I hope she doesn't do it. Oh, good admission, Keegan. I don't think assisted suicide is always morally wrong, but I could be wrong. I'll take that. To me, that is progress. If a Christian can say, you know what? Maybe it's not morally wrong in my sister's case to end her life. And I like that you said, I could be wrong. Yeah, I've seen that movie, $1 Million Baby. That was a sad movie. Last chance for Christians to come on. This is like an altar call. I see that hand. There's a Christian listening right now with back pain. You know I'm talking to you. There's a Christian listening right now with back pain. They're suffering. And they just want to talk to PineCreek right now. Hang on. There's a Christian listening right now who has a scar on their left knee. No, right knee. There's a Christian listening. If you're a Christian listening with a scar on your knee, that's a sign that you should talk to PineCreek right now. What if suicide was reversible? Now, there's a great question. Plus, I don't love my wife above myself? How do you know that? Maybe I do. But who cares if you love God so much? You can still disobey Him. We often disappoint the people we love the most. We rarely disappoint the people who we don't love. So I'm saying go ahead, disappoint God. He'll be okay. If your God's real and true and is omnipotent. Sell me PineCreek water. Yeah. Do you do these often? So you know what's interesting, what I just did? There's a Christian listening who has a scar in their left knee. You know what percentage of the population have scars on their left knee? It's a big percentage. I think it's like 20, 30%. Because when you're a kid growing up, people scrape their knees all the time. So if there's 10 Christians listening, I just spoke to 2 to 3 of them right now when I said, come on if you have a scar on your left knee. Jason K says, disobey God all you want, you are married to a Christian. No worries. There you go. My apologies to Stephanie Gray Connors. She was scheduled to come on and defend her views, but we ran out of time.